Donald Trump, similar to his previous term, he's facing problems. There are big similarities between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu in the way that their government coalitions or their members of cabinet or ministers, they're not really solid. They're not solid. They're not steady. They don't have steady coalitions and governments and people around them. Donald Trump previously, every Friday, he had someone being replaced. Bolton, White House spokesperson, people close to him. And we're seeing that from the early days now. But the most significant one was now Mike Waltz. Now, there has been a lot of talk surrounding Mike Waltz and the reasons behind Donald Trump taking him off. And there was this report in Israel saying that, no, actually, Mike Waltz, they're saying in the US that he was an Israeli agent. The controversy that led to the impeachment, Mike Waltz acted as an Israeli agent in the eyes of the US government. I thought they're all agents. I mean, if Trump himself gets over 200, how much did he get? 200 million or 200 billion? How much did he get from the 200 million from the Israeli lobby? But they're saying that, hold on a second, this man is, so what, is there another level of agent? But they're saying that. So clearly there's something going on there. I mean, there's some evidence to support that there's a conflict inside the Trump administration in relation to Israel, because many people were sacked or were forced to resign. Adam Bowler was one of them. Trump refrained from putting people in power who were viewed as critics of Israel too. But this report said the National Security Advisor was removed after he promoted a policy of aggression against Iran in coordination with Netanyahu, contrary to the president's position. Rubio was appointed as an interim replacement in a move that could weaken the National Security Council. Of course, that's Israel saying weaken the National Security Council. And of course, there was another report in the Washington Post about this. But the main thing that's coming out of this report is that Mike Waltz was a very close figure to Benjamin Netanyahu, and he was coordinating with him heavily. I mean, come on. Jimmy Carter himself, the previous US president, said that no congressman is able to criticize Israel. That's if we're talking about congressmen, by the way. And he said if any congressman criticizes Israel, they'll make sure he's not there in the next term. Track AIPAC shows you exactly how much these people are paid to go and act on behalf of Israel inside of the United States. And this lobby exists in other countries too, European countries, other countries as well. However, clearly there's something going on, because Trump, although there's ups and downs, although he has contradicting statements, although he does U-turns and 180s, he made statements that indicate that he's looking to de-escalate and reach a deal with Iran. His last meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, that was very short, that Benjamin Netanyahu was called for, saw Donald Trump asking Netanyahu to be reasonable. They were discussing the situation with Turkey, with Syria, with Iran too, and Donald Trump's recent statements in relation to Iran were statements of, oh no, we want to get a deal. We don't want to escalate. However, that totally contradicts the Israeli policy. Especially Benjamin Netanyahu, who was a key figure lobbying for the United States or for the state of Israel in the United States, so that the United States can go and actually have a war in Iraq, and now he wants him to have a war with Iran. Now, this actual move from Donald Trump is showing that there is some conflict. There are different opinions. There are different opinions inside of the administration, especially when it comes to the United States having certain actions in West Asia or in the Gulf that are more pro-Israel than they are pro-America. And that's an argument that, Politicians don't really speak about much. It's only people who criticize the policies. Are you acting on behalf of the United States, or are you acting on behalf of Israel? Now, there's no denying that the United States already acts on behalf of Israel. As a matter of fact, in Israel, they're confirming that. There was this report in one of the Israeli newspapers saying that make Hodeidah ours. Israel estimates this is the goal the Houthis is trying to reach, in reference to the Houthi attacks against Israel and how they are still conducting attacks against Israel and escalating these attacks. A day ago, 3 ballistic missiles and 1 drone sent on multiple parts, targeting Haifa, targeting the Ramat David base, targeting Asqalan, and targeting Jaffa, 2 strategic locations. That's aside from their attacks against any genocide-linked ship in the Red Sea. Again, any ship linked to Israel. Conditional. Of course, these attacks are conditional to stopping the genocide and lifting the siege of the Gaza Strip. And in this report, the reason why I'm bringing you this report is that they're confirming in this report that Israel doesn't have to go and attack in Yemen, doesn't have to travel thousands of miles, put itself at risk, because the United States is doing a really good job. Therefore, the United States is acting on behalf of Israel in Yemen and giving Israel an easy life. They have their aircraft carriers, they have bases, and they're carrying out these attacks. And Israel is sitting there thinking, well, we don't have to go and do anything there because our greatest ally, the United States, is having these actions. However, this report is showing you that there are people in the administration as well in the United States who are willing to do all of that for the sake of Israel. However, on the other hand, there are other elements inside of the Trump government who are trying to change things around. So you can call it a lobby battle. You can call it a priority battle. There's no denying that the United States administration has been a participant, a contributor, and an enabler of the genocide in Gaza. It's still butchering people in Yemen, the United States government, on behalf of Israel, for the sake of Israel, likewise with the United Kingdom as well. However, clearly there are internal differences, which leads us to the recent report about Saudi Arabia talking to the United States and telling the United States before their projected meeting not to talk about Israel. What's happening? I thought Saudi Arabia was supposed to join what's maliciously labeled as the Abraham Accords, as if any of these people have anything to do with Abraham, even though, you know, they're trying to portray it as, oh yeah, we're brothers and the Abraham Accords. But Saudi Arabia was the main target behind what's labeled as the Abraham Accords. By the way, Benjamin Netanyahu has been lobbying Saudi Arabia for decades now, trying to get some recognition from them. But he failed. He failed. And whether you're a critic of the Saudi authorities or a fan of the Saudi authorities, they haven't had peace with Israel. But the recent developments, not only relating to this report that I'm going to be talking to you about now, are showing that there's something happening in Saudi Arabia and its outlook for the future too, and its position. So there was this report here. It came in the Middle East eye saying Saudi Arabia told the US to keep Israel normalization off agenda for Trump visit. Meaning, well, Saudi Arabia, the country that Israel has been lobbying to have a peace treaty with for so long, and they were the main aim behind what's labeled as the Abraham Accords, they're no longer interested about having a peace deal with Israel. Why? What happened? Joe Biden, in his previous term, he had a deal for Benjamin Netanyahu that would bring the Saudis on board, and that's it, make them part of the agreement of the Abraham Accords, and have peace with Israel. What's happening now with Saudi Arabia? Well, firstly, according to this report, they told the United States, don't talk to us about normalization with Israel. We don't want to even talk about the subject. You can talk to us about defense, security, and economic coordination, economic cooperation. Why? Because they have offers coming in from China 24/7. The United States is still trying to be appealing. Of course, they have interests. But the Saudis know that they have other cards that they can play. And they're not going to be tied with Israel for forever, or tied with the talks surrounding having peace with Israel for a very long time, especially seeing as there are other options, and especially after the constant Israeli crimes that Israel has been conducting inside of the Gaza Strip for so long, and the arrogant statements that came from Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, is this the only report that's showing that Saudi Arabia is changing its approach towards Israel? No. Saudi Arabia, after the deal that they had with Iran in 2023 that was brokered by China, they started to have military drills. That took place in October 2024. They started to increase the ties more senior visits in Saudi Arabia. That was highlighted primarily by the latest visit that the defense minister had in Saudi Arabia. Saudi defense chief, when he met with Khamenei in what was labeled as a historic visit, he also met with the top IRGC figures inside of Iran. And when he was in Iran, he made statements about the importance of Muslim countries standing together against the Zionist entity. The Saudi representative in the ICJ, in his recent statement in support of Palestine and against Israel, he was using terminology that we haven't been hearing from the Saudi officials for a very long time. Things like barbaric aggression, the genocide in Gaza, apartheid regime of the state of Israel. And now this is being also highlighted by the Saudi officials telling the United States, don't even mention the normalization with Israel, don't even talk about, don't suggest it, as a prerequisite to meet them, by the way. So they're telling the American administrators, they're telling Trump, you want to come, ahlan wa sahlan, welcome, no problem. But don't even bring that on the table. We're not interested in talking about normalization with Israel. Now, there were contradicting reports in the past 2 years, and one of them said Saudi Arabia is actually happy to make a deal with Israel, even if Israel has a ceasefire with Gaza. So they're no longer actually interested in having a Palestinian state. The Saudis immediately denied that. Likewise with Benjamin Netanyahu, when he made statements, when he made his remarks about the Saudis having enough land to bring Palestinians there, to have a Palestinian state there, immediately had a backlash by Saudis who targeted him heavily. But the main thing here is things are changing. And clearly what we're hearing in mainstream media, well, it hasn't really been reflecting the actual truth, right? Usually we deal with a very small percentage of the real news, the reality of what's happening. But especially in relation to any potential deal coming between Saudi Arabia and Israel, this couldn't be further away from the truth. And now they don't even want to talk about the subject. And if you don't even want to talk about the subject, and you're simultaneously meeting with Iran, you're having your defense minister you're having military drills with Iran, that totally goes against what the greater strategy of Israel and the United States was in the region. The United States included with Israel, by the way, although there would be some differences. Because clearly there are certain times you'll see a different interest from the United States and Israel, although they're so tied. Israel's plan was to bring Saudi Arabia to its side against Iran. Israel, and of course, in a typical colonizer's way, the Sunni allies, they'll tell them. They'll tell you the Sunni allies, and they're butchering Sunnis in Gaza and in Syria, but they want the Sunni alliance against Iran. All garbage, of course. And some people fall for this sectarian propaganda. However, the reality on the ground is different. And these moves are heading towards the right direction. They're still far away from what's needed and what's required. However, the fact that foes, right, competitors, so to speak, like Iran and Saudi Arabia have been so far apart and at odds with each other, threats for a very long time, coming together, Saudi Arabia even ditching the talk about normalization with Israel. These are very important developments, and that shows you the real geopolitical position of Israel. It's much different than what they like to portray it as it is. You see, both Israel, its allies, and some of the doom and gloom prophets are telling us that's it, it's the new era, they're going to divide everything, that's part of their plan, to portray it like that. But in reality, they're actually losing influence, they're losing momentum, and they're losing in the bigger picture in the West Asian region or the Middle East. Because if Saudi Arabia ditches the talk altogether, well, what are you going to do? Saudi Arabia, even if they aren't taking the right position or the required position, like many Arab states are, towards the Palestinians who have been suffering for the past 80 years, if not the past century, but primarily with the latest genocide in Gaza that's still taking place, well, that doesn't mean that things are going well for Israel. No, they're not going well. And by that, they're losing in the long term too. Why? Because, well, if you're still committing this genocide in Gaza, you're simultaneously attacking Lebanon, attacking Syria, threatening Jordan. They've recently, some in Israel, made very serious remarks against Egypt too, bullying everyone. Well, everyone's going to see you for what you are. And if you had a policy of divide and rule in the region, or bringing some sort of alliances towards you against a bigger threat, and they view that bigger threat as Iran, well, that plan is failing. And there is no prospect of reaching any deal. And that's primarily not only from the crimes that Israel is committing and has been committing, but of course they went on steroids with their crimes, but it's also for their stupidity. This is political stupidity. This is political ignorance coming from the leadership in Israel, led by Benjamin Netanyahu.